Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Vaughn. Good to meet you. And
you as well, Brett.
yeah, we were here today because
Yeah.
we were watching a court case, a hearing that was going on for a mutual friend of ours. But we got to talk to each other a little bit after that. Then.
Absolutely.
And you've been through some of the family law courts then at this point.
I have. So it's given me tremendous empathy and concern for other dads who
Right.
are going through a similar situation, both with the family courts and also parental alienation and those experiences. 'Cause
Right.
I've had some of that myself.
Right. Yeah, that often takes place in companies, though. And
Right.
even the people that say, well, we'll never do this to you.
Right.
But
right.
so you got divorced back in 2014.
I did, and it was April, beginning, the 60-day waiting period in Texas. 2014, I think she filed literally on the beginning of April. And it was, I think from start to finish, our divorce was literally like 60 days.
Yeah,
Just
and-
ramrod that thing through.
Right. And what was the basis for the divorce?
The basis of the divorce was irreconcilable differences.
Okay. Can you tell me what irreconcilable differences means?
We didn't get along. That's what it was.
Yeah.
It was like we didn't get along.
But did you really feel that the differences were irreconcilable?
No, actually, and that's the interesting thing about it. I felt like irreconcilable differences was just an excuse from I just don't want to be with you anymore. It doesn't mean that two people can't reconcile, forgive, and really kind of repair the relationship.
Right.
In my view, what I felt like happened was that she just quit. She was
Right.
like, I'm done. I quit.
Right. And I've heard one judge say, and I'm sure that there are others that have the sentiment, that these are the magic words. If you utter the magic words in court, that there are irreconcilable differences that lead to the irretrievable, or the whole thing about marriage, it will not achieve its legitimate ends, but irreconcilable differences is part of the magic word phrase. That's really kind of what happened then, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I thought it was interesting because as we were sitting here, there was that one lady who was saying that yes, she filed for divorce under irreconcilable differences, but she didn't believe it.
Right.
That she loved her husband, did not want to have the divorce, and she was kind of encouraged to file for the divorce. And then when the judge, when she was asked if there were any irreconcilable differences, she said, no, I believe that God can reconcile us.
Right.
Wait a minute, you can't say that. And then they had to change then instead of being the petitioner, she was the respondent, because now the husband had to file for irreconcilable differences because the magic words could not be said.
And what we discovered was that there was that 60-day waiting period should have started all over again because there should have been a new case.
There should have been, absolutely, because once he becomes a petitioner, if she withdraws from the case, that case should not have continued.
Should never have gone forward.
Right. So it should have been something that they had to start all over again. Absolutely correct. Wow. So you have a lot of confidence in the family courts?
No, not at all.
And I'm glad to hear you say that,
all.
because we were actually here because we have so little confidence in what takes place in the family courts.
That's right.
And what we've been finding, several of us anyway, and you probably know this, that if we actually appear in person in the family courts, all of a sudden the judge's behavior changes a little bit.
It was remarkable. And so we were court watching today in support of our friend.
Right.
And everyone, we're doing Zoom meetings, of course, right now because of COVID-19, and everyone's behavior is on the best behavior, like, oh, yes, Your Honor, and
I know.
and these are people that come to find out, like, they have Thanksgiving dinner together, and then all of a sudden they got real formal when there's an audience.
Yeah, it is very amazing. So if you are watching this, and if you get an opportunity, especially during this time of COVID, I think this has been one of the blessings, honestly, because you have to go in person to see a lot of these things. But now that everything's being broadcast via Zoom or YouTube, we were at a hearing a couple of weeks ago, and the judge noticed how many people were watching. And he said that there's a lot of interest in this case, and the judge actually recused himself from the case.
Nice.
And look, I've never been in his court before. I've heard things, but it's only secondhand information.
Yep.
But he was on very nice behavior, and he was very patient and very kind and very willing to help the people. And in fact, it almost looked like it was just a whole different atmosphere from what I was expecting.
Well, and I kind of think the case today that we were watching, not only was everyone on their best behavior, but the outcome of the case also seemed to be, we don't want to make any large moves, anything crazy in front of an audience.
In front of an audience, yeah.
The outcome for today, it seemed like they just kind of kicked the can down the road and said, we're going to deal with this a little bit later.
Yeah, but and that's good on the one hand because it could have been terribly wrong. But on the other hand, to kick the can down the road, still it prolongs a problem.
That's true.
And this was a problem where there are allegations of abuse taking place. So now a child is with a parent who, from what I've seen and heard and read a little bit, it looks like the allegations are very, very credible.
Yes.
And so the judge is now allowing that child to remain in a dangerous position. And the attorneys are, in a sense, complicit with this. And I thought it was interesting because the attorney was asked to do something and kind of, like you said, kicked it down the can.
Kicked the can down the road.
And I just wonder if it's because now she gets to make more money out of the whole thing. Because if you settle it, my income stream stops here. But if we can delay it and protract it, and as we talked earlier today about one of our friends that has been in court for 11 years.
Oh, that's right.
With numerous false accusations, a new one. It's cost him over $500,000 at this point. I think that, when I look at the family courts, I have no confidence none in the least in any type of justice being done.
That's right.
So, but to go back to your issue of divorce then, again, you were a person that you did not want the divorce. You thought...
Well, I grew up in a home where we were taught, marriage is a lifetime commitment. And I went into my marriage believing this was the rest of my life. And, sometimes it's hard, and I understand that's part of relationships. Relationships can be hard, but you don't quit.
Oh, exactly. Exactly.
So.
And can you imagine going into the doctor's office and saying, "Doctor, I have a cold," and the doctor just says, "Okay, you know what? We've got the prescription for you. We've got the cure for you," and they inject arsenic in you, and boom, you're dead. Well, you no longer have the cold.
That's right.
But these family courts are the execution chambers of families. The execution chambers of marriage. And like we talked about earlier, by saying the magic words, and this comes from a person who's running to be a judge right now. He said, as long as you say the magic words, that's all that the judges care about. He knows that it's completely wrong. And I talked with a judge because I went back to him, and I'll mention his name, Judge Brett Hall of the 382nd District Court in Rockwall, Texas. And Judge Brett Hall, you know who I am and everything. But he told me that, I just cannot say, I don't think you need a divorce today. Well, actually, he could. But he said, if anybody makes the pleading, I have to do it. So he's not even acting as a judge. He's not hearing anything. He's acting as an enforcement officer of the executive
branch. He's a clerk,
branch.
Actually. He's kind of like transact business.
And the thing that when I've gone to these courts in person, they want the divorces done first because bam, 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 they're fast. I saw one divorce, and I believe if I had the time correctly, it was 1 minute and 41 seconds, start to finish. And you run through the questions, and that's it. And there is no defense. It is a predetermined outcome. And so in your situation, it was predetermined by the state of Texas, by the legislature. And by the way, in our Texas Constitution, Article 3, Section 56.13 specifically states the legislature is forbidden from creating special laws granting divorces. They're not even allowed to do this, and they have this statute, 6.001 under insupportability, that basically makes divorce on demand, divorce for any reason, for no reason. Divorce for, you can make up a reason. And you will always lose. You could be married to somebody who's going through some mental health issues at the time, and they filed for divorce, and the judge will not stop it, and the state will do nothing. And the state, I believe, is complicit in a great matter of fraud and unrighteousness, because the Constitution even says that the state has an obligation to defend contracts. Now, marriage is a contract. And I've heard people say, well, it's a different type of contract. Oh, okay, fine, whatever. A contract is a contract.
Right.
And if what you said, you got married, are you a religious man?
Oh yeah, very devout.
So you got married in a church?
I did.
And you were thinking that because of your religious commitment, you were having a marriage devoted to God that would last a lifetime.
Yep.
And yet the state is saying, your religious commitment means nothing. To me, this seems to be an interference of the state interfering in the matter of the church.
Wow, so you think that there's a constitutional issue around here?
Because because if you look at the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and there's two things. Number one, it's violating the free exercise clause, because the free exercise of your religion is that you are married to God, and that is something that you should be free to engage in. You made your vow and your commitment to God first.
Right.
You registered with the state, whatever.
Right.
But your vow was not to the state. And even if it was, the state has an obligation to protect marriage. Right now, there's no marital protection. Marriage is a sham. It's a fallacy for legal protection in Texas. But the second thing is, it's an establishment clause issue. And the reason I'm going to say this is because when you're talking about establishing something, that we talk about establishment clause as like establishing a state religion, but it's also establishing a state ideology. And what they are stating is this: if no-fault divorce, insupportability, irretrievability, whatever you want to call it, irreconcilable differences, if one person says that, and the state automatically, without exception, 100% of the time takes that position, they are establishing this viewpoint. And so it becomes and your viewpoint, but you say, no, wait a minute, that's not true. And I've got 10 witnesses here that agree with me.
Right.
But the state will always, without exception, 100% of the time, side with the petitioner. And the other thing is, and which I think is really bad, if a person says, I'm in slavery in this marriage, I want to leave this marriage. Well, you know what? If you want to leave the marital estate, you don't get to plunder the marital assets as you are leaving.
Yeah.
And the thing is, in your situation, you talked about children.
Oh yeah.
And then you experienced the parental alienation.
I did.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah. So I have two sons. I'm very delighted for them. They're in college now, 18 and 21. And so back in 2014, they were teenagers.
Right.
At the time. Mom would do things like take off for the weekend, even for like a church women's retreat.
Right.
And I lived a mile down the road.
Right.
And had no idea, wouldn't call me, wouldn't give me the opportunity to spend the weekend with my sons while she went on a retreat. And I'd find out at the end of the weekend, and I'd call her on Monday, and she's like, oh, whoops. And it was these efforts to kind of separate me, isolate me from the kids, by not communicating and trying to control it. At one point, too, when she got remarried, really encouraged my kids to call her new husband Dad.
Yeah.
And it was very painful. It was very, very difficult to experience.
So I understand that experience.
Right.
I had a very similar thing happen. I was shocked over some of the stuff that took place. Two of my girls have been married, and I was not even invited to the wedding.
Wow.
With one of my daughters, I was told that there was security there, and who gave them away?
The stepdad.
The stepdad, who, by the way, was a divorced pastor, and he actually he either got fired from his church or he voluntarily resigned, because when I found out what was going on, I wrote to him privately. I don't know what happened from there. I think maybe the church secretary read the letter. I don't know, but within a very brief amount of time, and they said, "Well, you're bitter, you're angry, you got him fired." Well, if I'm a pastor, the Bible talks about adultery, and this met the definition of that.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, you know what? You need to know about this.
Right.
And then now they've attacked me, and they've had all sorts of things that have taken place.
Sure.
But the thing is that you said, now you have your children. Did you talk with them right now? Do you have a good relationship with them?
I've been working to build that relationship.
Yeah.
I reach out to them as often as I can.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's difficult now as they're away in college.
Right.
But one in particular, it's been well, he goes to school overseas, and then and the relationship is strained. But I love him with all my heart, and I'd do anything for those boys.
And I think that's the same thing that I hear many times from men or from women that experience it, because it's not just a one sex thing that takes place. So let me ask another question here. With regard to your wife who filed for divorce, how did your family respond? How did her family respond? Because my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, you come from a strong family pretty much? Or?
Yeah, you know what, I always, I have one sister. My parents were full-time ministry. They were missionaries for a long time.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Guatemala, it's kind of the whole thing. And,
which mission?
CAM International.
CAM International. Yeah, now they've changed Camino.
Camino. Well, I think they went somewhere else too. But
I've got some stories I'll tell you off camera about that.
No, that's great. So my family has always been very good to my ex-wife and then also my sister's husband. They've been very loving to both of the in-laws, which has been, I know it's been a real blessing. And my ex was in a very difficult position because she loved my family. I really believe she loved my family. She just didn't love me. And I always believed we were a package deal. I kind of go with my family. And so she worked really hard to kind of curry some favor with my sister and my brother-in-law. Who, after telling a sob story about our relationship and whatnot, they recommended the attorney that my ex-wife used to file for divorce, and basically sided with my ex over their own brother. And it's been 6 years now.
Do you speak with your sister anymore?
She met me, this is kind of painful, but she met me in an empty parking lot a couple months after our divorce, handed me some mail, and she said, Vaughn, you're not welcome in our family anymore.
Wow.
And she got in the car, and she drove off, and I literally have hardly had a conversation with her since she drove off and left me speechless in this empty parking lot. I didn't even respond to her. I was just like,
So let me ask about her family then. Her family was a strong family?
No, I don't believe so, actually. Very hardworking, just Midwestern. Dad was a kind of a traveling salesman, so he was gone a lot.
Successful?
Yeah, financially he did very well. Yep. Mom, I think she was like the secretary to the mayor of the little town in Illinois that they lived in. And whatnot. She had an older sister who early on in her teenage years had a drug, struggled with an addiction. Fortunately, she got some help, which was great. And I think that process for my ex, she struggled with an eating disorder and some other issues.
Well, tell me, describe a little bit how your relationship was toward her parents. Were you somewhat close, or did you hate each other? Or
well, yeah. You know what? I liked her parents, less so after they paid for our divorce.
That's not the first time I've heard this.
But I always had I liked them. I was fond of them. Always wanted maybe more of a relationship with them. I think they were good, hardworking people. I think that they felt like I was always an outsider to them. They would always refer to my wife and the boys, because we had two boys. And I quickly learned that when they talked about the boys, that wasn't me, it was their daughter and our two sons that they would always refer to.
So a question that I have here.
Sure.
Your sister referred the attorney to your ex-wife. Her parents, or at least the father, helped to finance the whole thing. Have any of them told your children what they did?
My children have not really spoken to me about any of this.
And the reason I ask is this, because
And there was more legal proceedings after this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I can only imagine. But the reason I'm asking is this: is because children often have a very special relationship with their aunt or with their grandparents.
Yep.
And to me, it is an utter betrayal of grandparents to finance a divorce that is completely unnecessary and then to act like we just love our grandchildren.
Right.
You've destroyed their family. And I will speak this personally.
Right.
Because my ex-wife's father was the minister that married us.
Oh, wow.
Did the exact same thing.
Okay.
And wanted to make himself look like, he's dear old dad. And he was a missionary in Mexico. He had been with New Tribes Mission with a ethnos, and then he went to CAM, which is now, I think, El Camino or Camino or something like that.
Yeah.
And but you found out that here you see people that you think are supposed to be honest, people that should be on your side, and they are frauds. And I don't know any other way to say it except to say they are frauds. But and not to say that they don't mean well in certain things, but they do not live according to what Jesus said, because Jesus said, from the beginning, it was never designed to be this way. You should be, the man and the woman come together, and it's basically one woman for one lifetime. And that is because that's the best, among other reasons, but that's the best environment for children to be raised in.
Absolutely.
So here you have her father who has helped destroy the best environment for your children. And he probably still wants to be called granddad or something like that. And I mean, you don't know. I understand that.
Yeah, obviously I'm removed from that situation. So
has he attacked you personally?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
We're pretty much separate.
Yeah.
The most recent time I've seen my ex-wife, and she's avoided me like the plague.
Yeah. And that's a shame too, because I mean, I don't know what you went through during this time, but when my ex-wife was doing the stuff that nobody believed in, and that I thought, honestly, I thought that she's suffering some type of a mental or physiological or hormonal or menopausal thing. And, none of this stuff, I always said that I thought my divorce was the stupidest divorce in the history of Texas. But, the judges would do nothing. And the attorneys looked at, how do we win?
Right.
Well, it's guaranteed win, but how do we get more from him? How do we, portray him? And that's why, the attorney, I won't go into that, but, there's a lot of things that take place. And then you have, suppose your kids get married and you have grandchildren. Yeah. Will you be able to see them?
Sure hope so.
You sure hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where, that's at the place that I'm in right now, because, living with mom, who has the house that I gave up because I said, if I don't do this, I mean, first off, I wanted our marriage to be reconciled. Yep. But the second thing is that if you sell the house, it hurts your kids. They have no place to call home.
Right.
We had been missionaries, we traveled around, and Texas was their home. This was the only place that they knew as being home in the United States. We'd lived there for 8 years, which was the longest we'd lived in one spot. Right. And, ex-wife writing, well, we'll get divorced and we'll get remarried. It made no sense. That's why I said, was there something that's going on here? And it never should have happened.
We were married for 19 years.
Yeah.
And she found her next man after 6 months.
So we were married for 25 plus, and she found her next man within 17 days.
Oh, whoa!
And maybe beforehand. I mean, there's stuff that you don't know.
You have no idea.
Yeah, you don't have no idea. Right. But the family courts are filled with fraud and with lying and perjury.
Right. Yep.
And have you ever seen in a family court where perjury has ever been like somebody's been smacked out?
Never. Nobody calls out perjury. Right. It's like unheard of.
Yeah, and that one man told me, well, do you want us to go after perjury? Do you want us to go after the... And then he takes the worst case scenario. These men that are raping these little girls. Well, number one, that is the worst case scenario.
That's terrible.
Absolutely it is.
Right.
Do you want our resources to go to perjury? And I just said, listen, if you start enforcing perjury, you might see a whole lot of it. Well, you've got a point. But the reality is the courts do not do anything against perjury, which is why both of us have absolutely no confidence in the courts.
That's right.
Because of the we've seen it, and as court watchers, I don't know how many things you've gone to. I've gone to a number.
Sure.
But you start to say, this is crazy. I've seen a judge holding papers in front of him that said one thing, and the testimony is something else. And he can look at it. Well, you said this, but you're saying this. And doesn't say, did you lie in this document or did you lie right now? You can't have both.
Right.
And then punishes the innocent party because of the perjury.
It's terrible.
Yeah. So,
Awesome.
so you would like to see family courts changed?
I would love to see family courts change. I love families, and I'd love to see families reconcile and get back together.
Do you have any? I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
That's okay.
Any suggestions that things could be done to change them, to make family courts family friendly instead of family destructive?
Oh my gosh! Wow. If I'm not a policy wonk,
Yeah.
you know. I don't know the laws quite the way some of the pros do.
Right.
But
which doesn't make a difference. They just do whatever they want.
I think as a lay person,
Yeah.
what I've come to experience is that the flow of money seems to determine a lot of outcomes that are against the family.
So let me follow up with
Sure,
that then.
absolutely.
What about if we regulated the divorce attorneys? Maybe put a cap on their salaries. Maybe say, because some of these people, you know, like my friend that has had 11 years, his attorneys, which are Kunstfuller, and Kunstfuller's, if you go to their website, it says every story has two sides. You want Kunstfuller on your side.
Right.
And they're not saying you want, we'll take the right side. Whatever your side is, we'll find a way to be on your side.
We'll figure it out.
If you have enough greenbacks for us. And that's what they do.
Right.
And they are the same attorneys, by the way, who are representing Ann Georgelis versus Jeff Younger in the James Younger case.
The very famous case.
The very, very famous case. They are corrupt as can be, in my opinion. And I have heard stories about them buying off people that might oppose them. They just give them a big... And I don't know this. I've heard stories. I cannot say this, so this is what I've heard.
Right.
They are rumors. But I would say that, what if we capped divorce attorneys' fees? What if we regulated them like we regulate alcohol or tobacco or even big banks or big pharma?
Yeah.
I mean, so that, that maybe they had to pay so much for a license each year. Maybe they had to go through all of these ethics courses. Maybe if an ethics violation were filed against an attorney, it would actually be investigated the same way it would be against a bank that would do something.
Absolutely.
And because the ethical complaints against the attorneys, I think, would just skyrocket. And we've heard about, even with our friend today, I mean, why do you have to go through, this is your fourth attorney, and the attorneys that will take you to the certain point, and then they say, well, if you don't give us more money, we can't represent you in court.
Right.
After they've taken you for $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, well, I'm out. Well, don't you have a line of credit you can attach to on your house? Don't you have this? There's nothing else. Well, if you can't pay us, we're done.
Yeah.
They have not completed, and I think that there needs to be some type of oversight over contracts and that are engaged in, and I think that they need to be more specific and open-ended. They should not be one of these contracts that says, you know what, here's our initial rate, but it could be many, many times more.
Right.
And that's what they do.
I'll tell you kind of how this ended up. We had a subsequent, at the time of our divorce, I was financially struggling.
Right.
And I wasn't able to make all of those child support payments because they were incredibly onerous. And so I was back and...
but wait a minute, you're paying child support, you didn't want the divorce.
Right.
And they're taking money from you. See, that also seems to me like it's a bill of attainder, but that's a different story. But continue on, which again is against our Texas.
Yeah, it was basically like paying money to not see my kids. It was kind of what it amounted to.
Yeah.
But so she filed another lawsuit. Same attorney that my sister had recommended.
Right.
Went back. They filed another lawsuit to throw me in jail for like 6 months.
Right.
And just throwing the book at me, it was unbelievable. And I will say that my attorney that I hired, and there's a remarkable story on how I was able to retain her, was fantastic. And she does give me hope for
something.
For something. There's good people that really want to see families, justice served in families.
Right. Yeah.
So I actually worked out a deal with the senior partner of that law firm. My background's marketing, and I worked out a marketing deal with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a barter.
Yeah.
And it gave me a huge line of credit, basically, a big bunch of margin and I actually pocketed several thousands of dollars in cash
Wow.
because of the services I provided.
Wow.
And
That's-
it funded the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was actually one of the things that enabled me to basically outspend my ex.
So whoever has the most money gets
Wins.
the most justice.
That's right. So I did get...
In family courts.
All things considered,
yeah.
I was able to secure some, in mediation,
Yeah.
some outcomes that should have been secured the first time.
Right.
It was able to right some of that in mediation.
Okay, and that brings up another point here, because
Yeah.
as I heard today that there were a couple of things in a previous order that were somehow we forgot to include this.
Right.
Oh, now you can contract our services and we'll get it for you.
Yeah.
And really, so to me, I think that is a breach of their duties, and that these attorneys should be liable for having their license stripped from them because it's an unethical practice, because they are milking people for more money. But I mean, that's just a thought that I have as well. And then, you talked about the child support issue. Do you know that in the Texas Family Code in 201.107C, it says that the judge is supposed to make an order to rule in such a manner as to maximize Title 4D funds to the states. Now, the interesting thing is this: when you go in divorce and they say, well, we're thinking about the best interest of the children, the best interest of the children. In the Texas Family Code, they talk about the best interest of the children.
Right.
Directly or indirectly, about 140 times in the Texas Family Code, it talks about the best interest of the child. Oh, that sounds so nice.
Yeah.
Number one, nobody knows what it means. And I'm talking to
Right.
the judge, and they said, well, there's really no definition.
Right.
We have these factors, but there's no definition for it. But somehow, maybe we have to contract now with the guardian ad litem. We've got to contract with this somehow, because they're going to tell us what the best interest of the child is.
Right.
A stranger determines what they think, in their opinion, is the best interest of your child.
Right.
Which is completely, there's nothing objective about it. It's completely subjective.
Right.
And again, the money situation. Sometimes these people, and I've seen some of the child custody evaluation reports, a child custody evaluator, an amicus attorney, they can sway a jury, or if they're at a jury trial, just like that. I've seen this one, and this going back to the Younger case.
Right.
The guy who was there, and I forget his name right now, he looked to be good, and he did something that was completely, in my opinion, unethical. And they were actually witnessing a crime on video, and what he did, instead of saying, this is a criminal action, it is a felony, he stopped the slide and he focused on one point in the slide, and he tried to make it sound like that's bad parenting. Well, it was actually a criminal action by the wife.
Whoa.
It's really bad. So these people have too much power to begin with.
Right.
But they weren't there in the middle of the night feeding the kids. They weren't there when the baby was born. They weren't there when the baby was sick. They weren't there in the hospital room with you and everything else.
Yep.
But they determine this. But when it comes right down to the best interest of the child, the judge pretends to rule in the best interest of the child when he is mandated by the Texas Family Code to maximize Title 4D funds. And that's why you see a lot of times the standard possession order.
Right.
You can't have everything equal.
Right.
And my position has been the best interest of the child, as we talked earlier, is to be raised in an intact family with his or her natural mother and father, surrounded by a strong family and a society that supports and values marriage and family.
Yep.
But whenever you go through divorce and you start talking about the best interest of the child, they're lying, because the best interest of the child has already been neglected.
Right.
And no matter what they say about it, the guiding principle, we must maximize Title 4D funds. So the state is actually, one person said, pimping your children. And I said, pimping the children? I said, you know what? I understand what you're saying.
Right.
He believes that they're involved in child trafficking, and based on what I've seen, I would actually, But when a parent is removed from a child's life by a court for no reason, this is abusive. And if you look at other decisions that have taken place, the state must justify their actions. They can only do things in a narrowly tailored fashion when it comes down to fundamental rights like parental rights. And they abuse that as well. So anyway, but I mean, I don't know how you fix this stuff, except to say, the one thing I would like to do is go after the attorneys. And then with the judges, if the judges should be looking at the Constitution. I went to one judge afterwards and I said, did I have any constitutional protections in your court? Of course you do. Well, of course you do in family court. I said, then tell me where they were. Where were mine?
Right.
And then I've talked with other justices. And when I say justices, I'm talking about high up.
Right.
Very high up. And they've said family law is the wild, wild west.
Well, I know
you don't have constitutional protections.
Our friend's case over here,
Right.
Their judge used the word discretion.
Discretion. Right.
Discretion. And
Right.
I'm like, what does that actually even mean?
Right. Yeah, they hide behind the discretion, but again, if you have like in an instance of divorce, there's no discretion. It is
Right.
a preordained outcome. So you have no due process. It's kind of like, we are going to shoot you before we hang you. Oh, okay. That's nice.
I don't get a choice of which comes first.
Right, well, you can if you want to, if you prefer the hanging first.
But hanging
the
before you're shot.
Yeah, but the predetermined outcome
Right.
is you are going to be killed.
Right.
And you say, well, wait a minute, that's not, because due process, you are allowed to be meaningfully heard.
Wow.
But you have no due process in the family courts. And anyway, those are some of the things that we've thought about.
Yeah.
I really appreciate meeting you today. I had
Oh
no
my
idea
gosh,
anything
Jeff.
about your background or anything
Oh,
like that.
I'm
But-
so delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, but anyway, like I said, we just met today,
Yeah.
another testimony about the anti-family courts, the anti-family laws in the state of Texas, the abusive practices of our state passed by our legislature, which they actually have no constitutional authority to do in some cases, judges that want to hide behind discretion, and then they don't even use their discretion. And judges and attorneys, the entire industry is a racket. I've called it the anti-family court cartel.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, that got brought up in front of a judge, and I said, absolutely, I said that.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what it is. This is a cartel. It's almost as if they are involved in child trafficking. If you look at what happens to children of divorce, every single social malady that we have in America is exacerbated by divorce, whether it be high school dropouts, whether it be
Right.
unwed pregnancies, whether it be abortions, whether it be joining gangs, whether it be not finishing high school, not going to college, whether it means even rapes
Yep.
increase among that population. You can go down every single thing: psychological difficulties, social difficulties, health problems. All of
Yep.
these things are exacerbated by divorce, and our state is doing nothing
Yep.
to stop this. And this is where Governor Abbott, who was the Attorney General for 12 years, and now the governor, he knows about this. Our current Attorney General, Ken Paxton, people have differing opinions about him. I know Ken Paxton. I like him. I've had differences with him. I believe
Yep.
that he's putting stuff out in his Attorney General opinions that we can use to help take this thing down. There are some good people in our government, but we need to be vocal, relentless, and principled against this corruption that is taking place in our state.
Absolutely.
And we need to fight, because for some of us, we're not fighting for ourselves. We've survived
Right.
the carnage that they have inflicted,
Right.
but we're fighting for our children and for our grandchildren.
Absolutely.
And once again, Vaughn, thank you so much.
Hey,
Great
thanks,
to see
Jeff.
you. Thanks.
All right.